I'm unemployed. Due to a disability, I have a freedom pass. So therefore, I get a lot of spare time to go out and about doing videos. In the meantime, I am spending some time at college trying to do English and Maths GCSE exams, and they're coming up soon. This is being filmed on the 1st of May 2023. And as part of my GCSE English course, I've got to do a speak and listen exercise, and I've got to do a speech on a subject of interest. And I'm going to do another clip, which I'm going to edit it, join up with this one after I've done it, speaking about social media. The basic idea is to give it a test run and to see how long it takes for me to do the speech. The invention, evolution and development of digital imaging and the internet. I'd like to talk to you today about a 21st century phenomenon, digital imaging, and explain how in less than a quarter of a century it has changed many people's lives, even those who didn't know it in their childhood, youth, adolescence, etc. etc. I have a deep-seated interest in photography, and my interest is related to my interest in buses and trains, which has fascinated me since my childhood. I have had an interest in photography from my late teens and in the 1980s and in the 2000s, and since this has evolved into today's interest in videos. I frequently upload onto YouTube and to a lesser extent Facebook and Flickr. Having what was the then known technology in the 1970s, a cine camera, having one was out of the question. My parents had 3 of us to bring up, and it would have been beyond their financial means of being able to have afforded the purchase of the cine camera, a projector, and to buy and develop the films. And would they have allowed me to even have one? And similar questions would have been posed for the stills cameras and 35mm or the old 110 and 126 instamatic cartridge films of the era. Not just the camera, but the buying of films, printing and developing, and what about sharing the photos? For example, take photos on Saturday 11th of June at a wedding of you and your cousins, get the film developed on Monday 13th and have an hour sent off, return on Wednesday 15th, you send off for reprints of certain photos on Thursday 14th, and they are returned on Monday the 18th. You post them off on Tuesday the 19th, and they receive them Thursday the 21st of June, a clear 10 days later. And that is what we knew and what we had and what we lived with in the days before digital imaging entered the markets. Filmmaking underwent a revolution in the 1980s when video superseded cinefilm and proved to be very popular. After shooting the footage, it could then be transferred from a tape to video cassettes and watched within a matter of hours after shooting, and the tapes could be reused. You could record over the old footage several times. And whilst the end of the 20th century technology made for some major advances of analog 35mm photography and VHS videos and produced some excellent cameras, the era of analog photography was drawing to a close, and digital was waiting in the wings to take over and steal the crown of photography and video, soon to be collectively referred to as imaging. Yes, analog photography days were numbered and it had had its day and was living on borrowed time. There are 3 major components to consider that have been a major influence on digital imaging and huge leaps in popularity. Digital cameras. The concept of digital cameras dates back to the early 1960s when NASA, the American Space Agency, mooted the idea of filmless cameras, but it took another several years until 1975 for the idea to become reality when Kodak, the American film manufacturer, built a prototype digital camera. Digital cameras first entered the market in the 1980s, originally as very expensive specialist devices, but as time progressed, they became available on the mass market, consumer market, and they began to make inroads into the analog film camera markets. Perhaps you may think of it as little fatigue cracks in a metal structure, but those cracks will grow and grow and grow until eventually it will lead to major cracks and a spectacular collapse of the structure. Analog slowly declined, and at first analog held firm, but there was a development that would prove to be a knockout blow for analog photography and even digital cameras, which had its roots even further back than the digital camera concept. The mobile telephone. The idea of mobile telephones was first shown to be effective as long ago as the 1920s, when calls could be made from a moving train on railways in Germany. And in the 1940s, shortly after World War II, crude technology allowed car phone networks to be established in the United States of America. But in 1973, the first prototype of what would become today's mobile phone was built. And in 1975, the first mobile phone call was made on the UK market and a network was launched. And then later came the text message, and Pay As You Go was launched, leading to a revolution in communications, which were to influence early camera phones, which were developed in the late 1990s and launched in about 2000-2001. But there's a third major factor to look at. The Internet. The Internet, as we know it today, began life in the 1960s as communication between computers in large government departments, and in the late 1960s into the 1970s, such organisations as major banks began to use SLEM, but big corporations would need a building as big as this college to house its computer systems, and the forerunners of the Internet were well advanced by the 1980s. And by the end of the decade, the World Wide Web was created, leading to a lot of development during the 1990s for the information superhighway to grow and email to evolve as well. So by the year 2000, we had the beginnings of social media, with the multimedia message, being able to send pictures from phone to phone, and then video clips, albeit very poor quality and low definition, and to email addresses. But as the 2000s progressed, the first websites of what will become today's phenomenon of social media, Facebook and YouTube, were launched, followed by many others, including Snapchat, Instagram and Twitter. It's come on in leaps and bounds, overcoming many hurdles. As for today's smartphones, they can give many a digital single lens reflex camera, DSLR, a run for its money, and a smartphone can do so much more, such as video calling, being able to see the face of the person you are talking to all over the world, from as far apart as Canada and New Zealand, India to Iceland, and to be able to send an image to be seen inside 10 seconds of being taken, not the 10 days, and depending on if it's posted on social media, for all and sundry to see. Indeed, digital imaging is a far cry from its early days less than 50 years ago, and social media is a far cry from its humble beginnings less than 25 years ago. From carrying a bag full of heavy, bulky equipment to a device that fits into one pocket, and it's ventured a long way, perhaps further than we had ever dared dream of. And digital imaging is used in a whole multitude of other ways as well, such as when shopping online. It has led to several major retailers ceasing to publish their annual or twice annual catalogues as so few people use them, and we can buy our new knickers from the next website, or more often the app on our phone whilst on the bus to work, over coffee, and not have to traipse to a shop to buy such items. We can have them delivered. And rather than shop or mail order company having to spend ages employing an army of photographers and models to model and shoot the new range of clothing at considerable expense, and other items such as home furniture, it can easily and regularly be updated in an office, perhaps using modest equipment. So, from the 1960s when it all began, in a little over half a century, look how far we've come. And this next video is about how I've noticed changes in the way English is spoken in English, the influence foreign people have had on the English language in England. It may not seem much, but it is noticeable. Whatever happened to excuse me? I was born in 1969, and growing up in the 1970s, I was used to going to school with children of mostly Asian but also African immigrants, and often heard them speak in our own languages such as Urdu, Hindi, Gujarati, which came across to me as an incoherent babble, or to put it more bluntly, what would be better described as utter gibberish. You know, or similar. At that time, many of the East European countries that later joined the European Union were, at the time, still part of the old Soviet Union or Eastern Bloc, and the European Union hadn't been formed. It was still what was the European Economic Community. A mass immigration from such countries, such as Poland, didn't happen very often. In fact, although we had a few Polish people living in the UK, they were largely families of veterans of World War II service personnel, such as RAF pilots who had served in the Battle of Britain. After the aforementioned EEC became the EU in the 1990s, immigration from many former Soviet Union countries, now EU member states, most notably Poland, but from other European nations as well. And in the main, many of these immigrants have settled down, started families, found work and contributed to society and paid their fair share of tax and national insurance and have the right to consider themselves British citizens. But I feel that it has had an impact on the way English is spoken. Not negatively or very over majorly, but it's noticeable nonetheless. In the country where it originates from, England itself, English is, without doubt, the dominant international language and towers over French and Spanish to other multinational languages, and may well have more people who speak it as a second or foreign language as to a native language, with varying degrees of fluency. And even though some may be very fluent speakers, there will always be minor imperfections in their speech, but it's not something that can be criticised. They always get their message across. I have no wish to sound pedantic, but I have noticed several phrases that I was brought up to say that seem to have been changed. And I think this is the influence of people who speak English as a second or foreign language. For example, Asian people may say, "I am understanding you," instead of "I understand you." And more often from Asian and East European speakers will say something like, "I explain you," instead "I will explain this to you," when trying to describe how a machine works, for example. Or if they have made a mistake, instead of owning up with, "Oh, my mistake," or "No, it's my fault," it's become "my bad." Or the one that does wind me up quite something is when you need to get past somebody. I've always been taught to say "excuse me." That seems to have been replaced with "sorry." To me, the word "sorry" is used to express regret and apologise for a wrongful act, or when you've got something wrong, misunderstood something. But even English people have picked up on what I think is a bad habit. I do, of course, think our cousins across the pond have changed many English words, including the pronunciation. A good example being the word "route," which is the way one goes to get somewhere. They now pronounce it as "routes." But the word "route" means to be defeated and retreat in disorder, such as in a military battle, or to be heavily defeated in a soccer match, Some years ago, Manchester United defeated Arsenal 8-2 in what turned out to be a rout. And say a bus was rerouted to serve a new supermarket. It's pronounced as routed rather than rooted. US English, for example, takes the U out of colour and spells it as COLOR, and then changes the names of certain things. For example, in English we say rubbish. The Americans call it garbage or trash. Have you put the rubbish out? Have you put the garbage out? Flat. The Americans say the apartment. I rent a one-bedroom flat. I rent a one-bedroom apartment. Lift. Like, in blocks of flats, they call it the elevator. Take the lift to the fourth floor. Take the elevator to the fourth floor. Or one that can often be a bit embarrassing. Trousers, pants. I left my wallet in my trousers pocket. I left my wallet in the pocket of my pants. There is potential for offence or embarrassment due to the word pants in the UK referring to underwear. I could go on, but do you understand my basic point? Now remember, they are just practice speeches for a GCSE speak and listen exercise. Any feedback? Well, leave them in the comments. Thank you.